Okay, today I'm going to be working on another marionette head. This one's going to be a Frankenstein-like monster. So all this is a piece of wood dowel with some paper crumpled up on it and a little bit of masking tape to hold it into place, just so that I can get it to approximately the shape that I'm looking for. To mix up paste to do paper mache, the ratio is pretty simple. It's just 1 part water to 1 part flour. So if you're using, this is about 1/3 of a cup of flour, 1/3 of a cup of water, and you'll see it comes out to a pretty good consistency. And I just stir it up with a fork and it turns out fine. I take my paper, just normal newsprint, and I cut it up into pieces that are approximately 12 or 15 centimeters long by about 1 centimeter wide. The smaller the strip, the better the product is going to be. And for me, I'm just going to go through some of this and show you how I do it. You're going to get mucky, so that's all right. I just throw it on like that, strip some of the paste off, and really I just start anywhere. And then once your finger is wet, you will pick up the strips rather easily. So again, I just dunk it, take it off, slap it on. So really the first layer here is all just about covering it up. Try to get it on as smooth as you can. All right, a lot of extra paste on this first layer is not going to hurt you. All right. A piece that's a little bit bigger, but again, try to take some of it off, lay it on, and cross your pieces over. All right, not any science really behind this, but the neater you are, the better your finished product is going to be. So I'm going to keep doing this, and maybe I'll shoot some of this in time lapse. But to cover this, I would say I'm probably going to be maybe about 10 minutes to cover this. So I'll shoot some of this in time lapse and show you what it's going to end up being. Okay, so that went pretty quickly and I have it all covered. If you have areas that are fairly wet, like there's some areas down here that are fairly wet, you can always just take another piece of paper without any paste on it, lay it on that area that's a little wet, and just sort of push it into the wetness, and the paper will absorb that up. And if it's not, then just take and move a little bit of the paste around. Okay, so if you want to hurry this process up a little bit, the way that I do it is I just put this in the oven, about an oven that's at about maybe 200 degrees Fahrenheit, for only a very few minutes, 4 or 5 minutes, and then check it. It might take as long as, say, 10 minutes for it to completely dry and harden. But I would say really check it after a couple of minutes. I've had a couple that I've burnt a little bit, and it's still usable, but maybe not quite as good smelling. So yeah, I'm going to let this sit for a while, and then I'm going to come back and I'm going to put another layer on it. So for me, usually with paper mache. Usually with paper mache, I do 3 or 4 layers. Certainly the first 2 layers are just trying to get material on there to get it hard. And then after that, you can start to model it and figure out where your face is going to be and things like that. And I'll show you some other techniques for doing that. But for right now, just sort of get it hard. get a couple of layers on it, and I'll show you the next thing that I'm going to do. I also want to say that I used a wooden dowel for this, but that's because I'm going to turn this into Marionette. But if you didn't have a wooden dowel, you could just crumple some paper up in a circle and hold it together with a piece of masking tape, and then build your head on top of that, and then just paper mache the whole thing. So this will stand up very nicely because it has a pretty flat bottom on that little piece of dowel, and I can leave that there for the rest of the day for it to dry out. All right, I'm back, and I have done a little bit more work to this marionette head, and this is going to be a Frankenstein-like character. So I flattened off his head a little bit there, and I'm pretty happy with the way this side has gone, but you'll see this side has a little bit of a indentation here. So the way that I'm going to fix that is I've just taken some tissue, and I'm going to put some tissue on here. I'm probably going to do it like this, and I'm just going to cover that tissue with some more paper mache to bring that out a little bit. So I've built this up quite significantly. This is just a regular facial tissue that's folded up, and then this is going to be another layer that's going to go on the outside of that, just to bring that out a little bit. What I've been doing with this is putting a layer of paper mache on it, and then putting it in the oven for about, it depends upon the temperature, but I usually turn the oven on until it gets to be 400, and then turn it off, and that will last you for a couple of hours at least. And put this in, let it harden up, take it out, do another layer, put it in. 10 or 15 minutes, like I said, is sort of the most that it really needs to harden up. All right, so I'm going to put this layer on the outside here. I wanted to show you once again sort of my formula for making paper mache. Again, this is 1/3 of a cup. So the ratio is 1 to 1. And this is 1/3 of a cup of flour. This particular flour is that Robin Hood flour. And this one is the cake and pastry one, which is a little bit, I think it's a little bit finer ground. It's not quite as coarse as, say, one that was all-purpose flour. And then just simply 1/3 of a cup of water. And just dump that in. And then just with a fork, mix this up until all of the dry contents is mixed in with all of the wet contents. And it should be a fairly thin paste. You do not want this to be thick. And to give you an idea of how far this will go, you'll find that this goes a little bit, goes a long ways. So when I was doing this earlier, I did 3 coats to the original rounded structure. And then I put on this flat piece, and I've covered it once. So the entire thing is covered 3 times, and then this is covered once. And that was 1/3 of a cup of flour and 1/3 of a cup of water, did all of that. So a little bit goes a long ways when you're working in paper mache. I'm going to show you, I'm going to finish mixing this up a little bit more here. And you probably have to mix between, you know, so if you take a 15-minute break, when you come back to this, you're probably better off mixing this again. Okay, so I'm going to get that all mixed up good. Here's another suggestion for you. Before you begin, get yourself a piece of paper towel and just set it off to the side. Because if you're trying to get out of your studio or wherever it is that you're working, you're going to need to touch door handles and stuff, and you're going to be covered in paper mache, which is not a really good way to touch doorknobs and stuff. So have a piece of paper towel ready. So here are my pieces of paper that I've cut in 12 to 15 centimeter lengths, and they're about 1 or 1.5 centimeters wide. Not exact by any stretch of the imagination. So the way that I do this is I hold my thing that I'm doing my paper mache in one hand. I get my, whatever it is I'm getting ready to put on in the other hand. I dip my paper into my paper mache, I flip it, and then I slap it on the side of the container and I drag it off. I flip it over, I slap it on the side of the container, I drag it off, and then I put it on. One of the things about paper mache is it works best when you're not working in a specific angle or a specific direction. So this should be more about making this random, and the more random you make this, the better it will hold together. Okay, so here's the other thing is when you have your hands are a little bit sticky like that, you can just stick them into the paper mache, into the paper pile, and you'll get one that just sticks to your finger, and just go with that one. Okay, so I'm going to cover up all this tissue where I needed to bring this out a little bit. And again, just stick your hand into the pile, get whatever piece. Okay, so I wanted to show you the next step in the process here. My Marionette is very hard now. It is quite solid. You'll hear it sounds a little hollow still. But this is about 6 or 7 layers of paper mache. And what I've done is to figure out where my face is going to go for my this is going to be a Frankenstein-like figure. I've put in where the mouth is going to be, and just some pencil lines about where the nose is going to be, the eyes. And so this is going to be the brow ridge across here. So this is going to be a fairly high, hard brow ridge that's going to protrude probably almost a centimeter across there. So the way that I'm going to do that is, it's not quite the same height here, so I'm just going to modify that a little bit. Always modifying, always look at it and then re-look at it and figure out where it is that you actually want things to go before you start putting them in permanently. So what it is that I'm going to use is some weld bond glue and a generous amount, maybe about a teaspoon or a teaspoon and a half in a plastic container. Close the top on your weld bond or it will surely harden up on you. Very, very difficult to get unstuck if you don't close the lid. And a little bit of water. A little bit more than that maybe. And I'm just going to take my fork that I use in my studio all the time. Not a regular fork that my family eats with. And I'm going to stir this up. And you're going to get a white, milky-like substance. All right? See that? It's liquidy, but you can see there's glue in it. All right? And to build up my brow ridge across here, I'm going to use simple facial tissue, just a normal white tissue. And I'm going to fold it into about the size that I want it to be. So about half of this folded in half is about the length that I want it to be. And I'm going to fold it over a couple of times and fold it over a couple of more times until I get it in sort of the shape that I want it to be. And then I'm going to dip it into this mixture, and I'm going to get it very wet. And flip it over, both sides are soaked all the way through. All right, you can see you can see the water running out of it, okay? So you want this to be very wet, all right? And then I'm going to put this on here where I want it, and I'm going to just push it onto my marionette head. Just like that. Now I'm not going to squeeze all the water out of it because I want this to dry on very, very hard. But you should see it should be a little bit mucky. So I want it to taper up here at the top. So I'm going to press that on very well, like that. I want it to also taper off here on the ends. So I'm going to press those on very hard. All right, now you might get some of the paper from the paper mache getting a little bit wet. That's perfectly fine. That's what's going to happen. So I'm just going to set that down for a second. I want this to be a little bit more tapered across here. So what it is that I'm going to do is I'm going to take a tissue, and this time I'm going to rip it in half. And it's a 2-ply tissue. I'm going to fold it in half, and then I'm going to maybe take a pair of scissors and then just cut this in half. All right, so I have a lot less tissue this time. So I'm going to fold this over quite a bit smaller than the previous one, and then this is going to go on here to make it a little bit more tapered for me. Okay, so again, this is going to go into our glue and water mixture. Pick up as much of it as you can. Put it on where you need it to go. Press it in and really start to work those two pieces together a little bit. You see, I'm not in here pushing all of the liquid out because I want that liquid to harden up. All right, so there we go. So that's going to be my brow ridge. The next thing I'm going to do is the nose and chin probably. Okay, so for right now, have a go at doing a little bit of that with the water and weld bond mixture, and I'll come back and show you the next step I'm going to do. All right, so I've just spent a couple of minutes here, and I folded up a piece of tissue and made it into the shape of the nose that I wanted. And I folded up another tissue and inserted it, made it very square, and I put it on here for the chin. And then I took another one and made it quite flat and wrapped it across that to cover up where the little square was going to be. So the next thing that I'm going to do here is I'm just going to let this dry, and this might take a significant amount of time to dry. This may take upwards to 24 hours, and I would suggest that you don't put this into the oven and dry it. You'll end up with a product that will not be that smooth. So I would suggest that you just leave this for now. Go and work on another project, start another marionette, paint the pieces that you have already made or ready to be painted, but do something other than touch this anymore. I would suggest that you just set this down in a open space and let it dry, and come back in 24 hours and it'll be completely hardened up.